Might as well introduce us. Hi, we're the production illustrators, storyboard artists, mat artists of Local 800 of the, I always write this down because it's such a mouthful, the IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Moving Picture Technicians, Artists and Allied Crafts of USA, its territories, and Canada. But we like to call it the IA, which is different than AI because our intelligence is completely natural and homegrown. So, we got a little bit of a show for you first, but I'd like to start by saying the men and women that we have here on our panel today, excluding that guy, never saw him before in my life. They're all, and we are all, very good draftsmen. We draw pictures really pretty, as Donald Trump might say. But the reason why these people are the best in the field is because they know a lot about story. And we're going to show you a sample of that right now. Lights down, please.
erreicht in 10 Sekunden. Dieses Blattprojekt.
Ooh, scary kids. Lights, please. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists for this evening. I have Ed Natividad.
Hi.
Warren Drummond. David Duncan. And Andrea, I got your first name wrong. I'm trying to do the Portuguese pronunciation of last name. Andrea Dopaso.
Dopaso, perfect.
And I'm Tim Burgard. How are you? So before we go much further, I just want to, at one point before we end here tonight, you guys, if you have any questions, I'm going to direct you to come up to the mic, and that'll probably be around 3:35, since I'm watching the time like a hawk right now, okay? So essentially, I like to start with a very basic question, kind of lets everybody get on the ground floor, and that is, how did you get into the business? And Ed, you ready to go?
Well, of course.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't a linear path. I mean, I struggled, tried other things before that. But I was, I think my first introduction that this was actually a real job was right around age 13. There's a good book that came out called Star Wars Sketchbook. It was like a blue paperback. But Joe Johnston, it was a lot of his drawings. And it was the first time I was introduced to industrial design. And it showed that these films were developed beforehand. And of course, as the years passed, I thought I would be a car designer. So I went to school in Detroit. And after 2 internships, that's when I kind of realized this is not for me. All it was a lot of taillights, rearview mirrors. But the good thing about that school I went to in Detroit, they offered internships at the car companies. And one summer they offered me an internship. General Motors had an advanced concept studio, not in Detroit, this one was in California. So actually this was kind of like almost my big break. And for 3 months I served this internship. But I think I was more interested in, being in California and seeing, just learning more about the film industry, as a designer. So, from there I think, for a couple of years I struggled, but I finally got into ILM. It was actually easier to get into ILM for me than to get in a union at the time. This was like in the early 90s. But that's pretty much the story. And from then, I've been doing this for a long time, almost 20 years, if not more.
Okay, Warren?
Yes, I started off as part of the Corleone crime family. And back in New York, I went to the School of Visual Arts. So after that, it was very hard. Just my main focus was I had both wanted to be a comic book artist and also wanted to be a screenwriter. And it was very hard just as far as getting into the comic book industry, because as a penciler, you have to really be totally on point as far as anatomy, perspective, and all those little details. I didn't quite have all that. But I also wanted to be a writer more than that, and I think my focus was split. And it took me 9 years, about 9 years after college, where I started to really focus more on storyboards, because I was able to combine the storytelling from comics but with the narrative from film. And then I did some samples for a friend of a friend's short film, and then that got me samples for a movie called The Drop Squad, which was executive produced by Spike Lee, and that got me to Above the Rim, which was a Tupac film, and it just went on from there. And then I did second unit work on the third Die Hard movie. So I find that when I started out, doing a short film and doing it for free did get me samples, and those build up. And then I moved out here, and then I was able to get the LA work, but I was in New York for my first part of my career, but I've been at it for now 23 years. So there you go.
Okay. David?
Hi. Wow, I've actually had a couple of different careers in the entertainment industry. I was cameraman director for a while, and then storyboard visual effects guy. But yeah, I started off as a artist, wannabe artist, and cinema geek when I was a kid. And I grew up in Oklahoma, which, to borrow a quote, is if there's a bright center to the universe, it's on the planet it's furthest from. So there wasn't anybody to go talk to about film, and so I thought I wanted to be an architect. And so I worked as a draftsman at an architectural firm all through high school, and then took a couple of gap years and worked as an illustrator, and then decided I wanted to go back to film school. Got out of, the film school was not narrative oriented, and it was in the Midwest, again, on that planet, that same planet. But learned a lot about documentary filmmaking and thinking on my feet. And so eventually when I got out, I moved to Denver, where there was a production community, started working as a cameraman, and had put the whole art thing behind me, because I'd actually put myself through college as an illustrator and artist. And, but then got to Denver, camera work. A friend and I partnered up, and I combined the art and film. We had a visual effects house for a while in Denver, but then eventually I started directing more through the visual effects work. But eventually then, after directing for a couple of years, doing like unsolved mysteries stuff, older people remember that from the 90s, recreation stuff. Moved out here to LA, because it's like, oh, time to go to LA after I'd worked in the Bay Area with some of the Matt World and some of those guys up there, the Star Wars Matt people. Came down here and got kind of backed into storyboarding by accident, got in the union, and 20 some odd years later, I'm still storyboarding, but I still go off about 30% of the time and like direct Discovery Channel dinosaur shows. So I have this great career of like, sometimes I'm storyboarding Iron Man, and then other times I'll be like playing with dinosaurs, so I'm basically a professional 10-year-old. So yeah, and the whole thing I do now, I do a lot of animatics, which again kind of backed into that from storyboarding and knowing how to do visual effects and animation. And that brings in a lot of my directing experience, because I know how to construct sequences and put little sequences together. So that's basically it. It's like, what hat am I wearing today on this show? So, which is, I love working like that.
Awesome. Andrea?
Well, I'm originally from Argentina, and I guess at the beginning I never even dreamed with working in the movie industry. I'm an architect. My background is an architect, and I'm also an artist. I study paint many years. And I was just, starting working as an architect, and a friend of mine said, well, we're working in this movie that is from England, and we need somebody to do a model. Do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I started in the art department and working models and set designing. And when I saw what it was, I just was mesmerized. I love it. It was so much fun. It was so creative. The opportunities to design and to dream different worlds, I guess it just completely caught me by surprise. I was not really expecting it. I was just thinking in just going there, doing a model, and keep being my life as an architect. But it didn't work as I planned it. It worked better. And then more movies come down to Buenos Aires. And And basically, the reason why I'm actually in Los Angeles is some sort of a love story. I was working in a movie, and I kind of fall in love of both things, of the movie industry, and an American person. So when he decided to come here, and I said, oh, well, forget it, you know. And I was sitting on the theater one day with a friend of mine, and Dick Tracy was, I don't know, this is an old movie, like in the 90s. And I was just sitting there in the theater like this, and I said, okay, I'm going. And basically I did that. I bought a ticket without plans, without anything, and came to Hollywood. And I started painting sets, like with a brush, you know, with a roller. And it went from there. I love every single part of it. I worked many years as a set designer because my background was as an architect. So basically that was the way that the door opened for me. But I'm definitely interested in, you know, the visuals and art. And so illustration basically is what I'm most happy doing. And one thing just follow after another, and I guess it's just a pure story of love. Just love doing it, love what I do. I really never plan anything or said, oh, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna follow this career. It's just the doors kind of open up, and I enjoy every opportunity that was presented. And I end up working on the biggest shows in town without trying. And
That's
and
bad
I
news for a
feel
lot
blessed.
of you who actually have a plan.
I feel truly blessed. I think it's fun. It's fun. You get to create every single different, you know, world. Like a kind of one day you're doing a spaceship, the other day you're doing a weird planet, the other day you were doing a city from, you know, the 1940s, the other day you were doing, so every time that you go into a show, it's an adventure at the start. And you just follow your heart and just, you know, do the best you can. It's competitive. I mean, I've been lucky, but I can't stop. I mean, you had to learn. You had to constantly, you know, push yourself in and work harder. And you cannot just, you know, oh, I draw and that's it. No, you have to, but it's fun.
You don't work just when you feel like it. That's
well,
people think about artists. You know, it says, oh, they just wait till inspiration hits them.
No, it's when you are in a show, it's like it's heavy. The pressure is huge. You are working with a lot of talented people around you, and
yeah, be brilliant, but do it now.
yes. So, but it's that keeps me alive. Like it keeps me alive. Like I love it. I'm happy.
Okay, well, along the lines of what Andrea was saying, I do believe in follow your bliss. I don't know if Ray Bradbury coined that, but he definitely said that to a bunch of us at Art Center when I was there. And my career kind of wanders around. Like, I never imagined I'd end up working in film. I kind of thought, you know, I probably thought I was going to do comic books or Saturday morning cartoons, because those are the two things I really loved, even in high school. But, you know, those things add up. You know, you do a little bit of comic book work, you go to an animation studio, they look at your work, and they hire you for that. I end up going from doing character designs and all kinds of things to storyboards. And then when they fire me, I decide I got to take my talents somewhere else, you know, so I end up getting into live action, and it kind of just generated that way until finally I worked on Stargate, and that put me in the union, and after that I was able to work on a lot of other, you know, projects. Now we put together, or I tried to put together this panel where we have a bunch of people who've worked on different comic book properties, and somebody suggested Marvel versus DC, which is a little simplistic, and I don't want to start a war here in the aisles. Yeah, these days the DC people probably get killed, but I would like to ask a question, because I think it is relevant to our skills, and that is, Is it different working on a comic book property as opposed to any other kind of film? And if you've worked on, say, with Marvel characters or with Marvel productions and or Warner Brothers DC productions, is there an actual difference? So Ed, you've actually worked on that and Star Wars, and you'd probably name a franchise, you probably worked on it. So, well,
yeah, I think you have to be somewhat, kind of aware of what the fans want. There's always backstory to some of these characters. So I think, I'm a comic fan and also a fan of, design and other things. But I think, you can't please everyone. But I think you have to I think you have to talk to the fans, and just get a basic sort of survey, and even go online before you go into these things, because I think that will sort of make a difference, in terms of the response. But what was the other question?
Well, there's a difference between working on Marvel or DC stuff.
The only Marvel movie I've worked on is Spider-Man, but that was more of a character design. So I think, like the world of Batman, the good thing about that, it was almost more grounded, and it wasn't, let's say, like Iron Man, for example. I mean, there was some degree of logic that we had to sort of exercise in that, and everything, for the most part, was going to be in camera. So we had to be aware of, like in terms of my process, I like to use 3D. That way, I can get as close to the design, as the final, product. And it's a good thing to be aware of, like, size, like, let's say the Batmobile, for example. Size will equal, based on the material, it'll equal weight. And all these things are a factor, even in safety. So, once you get closer, actually, I encourage designers to try to stay on the production as long as they can, to see how things are really built. So it isn't so arbitrary when you do the artwork or the concept. You have to have some kind of idea, what can be done physically.
Yeah, Lisa, a question. With the Batmobile specifically, they have to actually make a working model, don't they?
Yeah, and that, of course, you start with the concept. That was the team. Production designer was Patrick Tatopoulos, who I've worked for years. I worked with him. And we had a good art director, Kevin Ishioka, and the equivalent of a vehicle set designer, Joe Hira, who was actually more of an engineer. So I did the aesthetic, the basic aesthetic, and then it was, it took a team of people, not just one person. Just wanted to clarify that. But that's how it is with a lot of these things. It's not just one person; it is a team effort.
Okay, well, Warren and I actually worked on Gambit for a while before it kind of went into suspended animation.
Yeah, like Captain America just.
But Warren's worked on some other Marvel properties, and you've worked at TV, so.
Yeah, I've worked on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. since it started out. I worked on Agent Carter. I was just briefly on a pilot about a planet where a guy with a big S comes from. It's going to be on Sci-Fi Channel. Some guy has a little cape thing. And I've done some extra photography work on Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men First Class. I find, not just as far as a style thing, when you work on those big properties, security is extremely tight. Oh, yeah. That's the drawing is pretty much the same. Drawing is drawing, but you don't really get a full script very often. They check everything. You can't make copies of work. It's just very tight, because they have to be tight, because if anyone takes a picture and puts it online, they can, oh, what, Bucky's alive? What? Then you can find in everything. So I find that's the big thing, that they're very, you could say paranoid, but not paranoid, but they're just very careful on not getting anything out, because once it gets out, it can kill a whole plot line. As far as style, it's just, you're just doing a feature, or you're doing a TV show. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I'm just doing a TV show, but you don't do it as a comic. You have to make sure that you're drawing as live action. You're not trying to draw a comic, but it does help to have have the love of comics, so you could put some of that aesthetic in there. So it's always a combination of comics and the live action. So I guess that's it.
All right, Dave?
What was the question again?
Well, working on like comic book properties as opposed to just any other kind of film.
Yeah, again, a lot of pressure. And here's the problem. I grew up more of a movie geek than a comic book person. I was more into like creepy and eerie when I loved that fine art and the Frazetta stuff and that kind of art more than I like the spandex superheroes. I had all that too, but yeah, it was more the realistic drawings of like horror and stuff like that. I love that sort of stuff, and that's kind of where I learned to draw was Frazetta and Felix Maas and those guys back in the 70s. But again, yeah, storyboarding on Marvel stuff. And my storyboarding thing is I tend to, because I come more from a camera background with art skills, I tend to like to draw frames that look like photographed frames. A lot of times, a lot of storyboards are kind of, I don't mean this badly, but like dog and pony show. It's like, ooh, that's a cool frame that sells the feel of that shot. But sometimes those frames can't be shot. And they look really cool.
Well, it's a groin pull to go from a wide angle lens to a long lens, consecutive.
Or something, two objects can't be placed a certain way in the frame.
Yeah.
With a certain lens, you can't do that. And I tend to think more through a lens when I draw, so my shots tend to look more like frame grabs or something. Not that they're that good, but I tend to place things like that and make it less like comic booky in my drawings. But it was interesting kind of getting back up to speed on Marvel and everything, because I worked on the first 3 of the Marvel Studio things, the first 2 Iron Man and Hulk, and they were still trying to figure out their deal, how it was working, and it was a lot more relaxed. I just came off Spider-Man Homecoming down in Atlanta, and
but that's Sony. So
no, that was
right. That's right.
Ooh, that was, I would say that
Sony's putting money into it, but they're not the ones running it.
It was 90% Marvel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And so it felt like, again, Jeremy Latcham and Kevin Feige and those guys were like, Duncan, what are you doing here?
Well, they're not literally on your shoulder, are they?
No. Well, I did run into Kevin and Jeremy, and they actually were the ones that recommended me.
Oh, okay.
I was like, somebody got me on this. I don't know why. But yeah, then that's it. Jeremy was like, we like your sequence design, because way better artists than me out there working in this industry. But I think we're all in agreement on that. But
I'm not burning it.
But yeah, so that's.
I absolutely agree, by the way.
So yeah, it's just a lot of different requirements working for the comic book movies and I know a lot of the comic book storyboard folk, they can contribute. I'm like, oh, what was the backstory on that guy again? I forgot. And then the other guys are like, oh, he did this and was married to so forth and so on.
Well, it's just because you're telling the story visually doesn't mean that you get to write the script.
Right. But that's it. You do bring that stuff in. I just did an interview for a period medieval picture that might be shooting in Europe, and the director very much wanted character stuff too. He's like, if you have an idea for something, please tell me. And I was like, well, the character could come around the corner and see this beautiful architecture, and then when it gets destroyed, you can feel bad about it. And it's not really, it's implied in the script, but it's not, there's no scene where he sees that. And I'd love to draw a shot like that. And he's like, go nuts, draw that.
Awesome. That's always a good feeling.
Or just one other example was a thing called Flyboys that I did about 10 years ago about World War I pilots. I designed all the aerial sequences, and they couldn't figure out the ending. And Ray Harvey, another storyboard guy, and I, basically they were like, well, how do we kill the guys? It's some cool maneuver. And Ray was like, oh, you remember that thing where they said that they have guns to shoot themselves if their plane catches fire? How about he pulls out the gun and shoots the bad guy? Just plane to plane. And director Tony Bill was like, that's the ending. That's how we kill the bad guy. Storyboard guys.
I know, and we get paid so much more extra, don't we?
Yeah, we get those big writer bucks too because of that.
I always wish that storyboard artists could get a little taste of that writer's money. I'd have 2 homes by now. Andrea, you come from you do whole big beautiful illustrations as opposed to us storyboard artists that do little tiny black and white ones. So
I'm not involved with the story, frame by frame. But I had to agree that security is, I guess, one of the funniest things, because I mean, even though I don't have to follow the story, at least I had to know what I'm doing, you know? Like they said, okay, you know, we're gonna land in this planet, and this planet has a forest, and then we wanted it to be kind of alien-like, and they said, okay, can I read that? No, you cannot read the script. And I said, but then I supposed to, so I started illustrating, and I said, well, but you don't know that in here there has to be like a rock where they sit down. I said, no, I didn't know. I didn't got to read the script.
It's like that. I have to explain a little bit. Sometimes we're working on projects so far ahead that the script isn't even done. But then again, there's times when the script is so tightly, it's so secret that they only give you dribs and drabs.
That's a paragraph.
In Marvel, I just finished the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I was surprised. They said, you're gonna get to read the script. I was like, oh, cool, great. So the first day, you know, you sit down there, and then you get the script, and so they bring it in an envelope that is sealed, have your name taped in every single page. So if you lose a page, you know, your name's this big in each page of the script. Even you have a hard time reading it because your name is kind of covering all the letters, you know, of the script. So, okay, so they gave me the envelope. A person came from Marvel. They give me the envelope in the hand. I had to sign a paper. They take the envelope back, and I said, we're going to be back in 45 minutes. And I have like okay. So I was reading it, and I was almost arriving to the end, and I said, oh, great, okay, I won't get it. So it was like about maybe, 10 pages left. They come from the office and say, sorry, we had to take the script. I didn't finish it yet. No, we are really sorry. We had to take it. But I only need 10 more minutes. No, you have no more 10 more minutes. So they grabbed the script, and in front of my eyes, they took it to the shredder, and they shredded there, and that was it. And I never got the chance to read the script again. So I don't know how the movie ends. But yeah, security, I mean, that was Marvel. I mean, Star Trek. I work in the 2 Star Treks, and those are like a crazy security too, even though it's not like a big character. But because of what the movie represents to people and the amount of followers they have, so everything was a code name. So we cannot call anything for the real name. So I'm working on the Enterprise, but it's not called the Enterprise. It's called the Kitchen, Charlie's Kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
So they said, okay, you have Charlie's Kitchen done. And I said, I don't, you have to remember. So because you cannot write, okay, the Enterprise is Charlie's Kitchen, this is like you don't have like a. So basically it was funny. In one point we started inventing code names for ourselves. So we all have like a funny names, So everything was like a kind of nobody knows what it's talking about, It was like a kind of funny name. And but it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see the security. Marvel was probably the highest security movie I ever worked in, but it's understandable. Like one thing I think also is important when you're working in those kind of films. You know that what you're doing, it will be like analyze, and it will be, if I'm working on the Star Trek and working on the Enterprise, and I'm thinking, I wonder what, the fans will say about it. What if I draw some blob in here, like people will look at it and then say, what the heck that is? So I think when you are part of a big movie with characters that they have sequels and they have followers, you become more conscious of what you're doing and the legacy that you can leave behind, with one simple idea that you put in an illustration that suddenly, stays there, and it becomes part of the history of that, trilogy or that family of movies.
Oh, yeah, so. Absolutely. Now, this is the time where if you have a question, I'd like you guys, we're going to ask the panel one more question, and while we're doing that, you guys go ahead and line up if you want to ask us some questions. Sounds like we got some people about ready. In fact, why don't we go to it right now? I just want to, before we do that, and I don't want to tell you this as you're walking out the door, running to go get a coffee or something. We've got some more panels coming up, and today, not in this room, but in room 29AB at 7 p.m., the art department of Firefly, the Josh Whedon show, is going to be having a panel. And because it's a late panel, they're going to be at the autograph table beforehand, 5:30 to 6:30, Everybody know the pavilion area out here, the sales and stuff? They're going to be at table AA4, and we will be there after this if you want to talk to us one-on-one or ask any questions that nobody else in the room is interested in. You can talk with us, and we're going to be there right after this at, what is it, AA1. That's right, AA1, we're going to be there, and Firefly is at AA4, sorry. Firefly is at AA, you can probably see each other we're probably going to stare daggers at each other from across the way. And then in this same room tomorrow at noon, the production designers are going to be here. So you're going to be able to talk to the people that hire us. Okay, so you first.
Hello. Sorry, this is so weird.
Okay, somebody get her a box or...
No, it's okay. I'm good. I'm
Okay.
fine. Hello. I come from the land of network TV, which is very different than thanks. Which is very different than film in terms of prep and things like that. So I have a question for storyboard artists and concept designers alike, just because I really want to understand the dialogue that takes place when you do your job. So you're not the writer, you're not the director, and you're not the production designer. So when you come in, I know it's going to be different on every project, but what is that relationship like that you have with everyone? Is it a real conversation back and forth, or a lot of the times is it, I want it to look like this, and you do it, and they're like, okay, thanks, bye.
Warren could definitely answer that more than me. Just for my 2 cents, it seems to be a lot more on the practical side. It's like they have locations, they have a particular script, they want to get something done pretty quick, and you're basically trying to help them facilitate it. There isn't quite a lot of time to conceptualize all that stuff.
I can tell you about TV work on agents. On agents, we have like a new director every week, and I don't do all the episodes. I just do the episodes where there's effects or there's certain camera work that they need, or for a certain action sequence they need to have blocked out. Like the opening for the 3rd season opener, where the guy discovers that he has powers to melt things, the metal objects. So usually come in the office, I'll have the script, they'll send me the script by email, and then the director very often has the shots they need blocked out. Because in TV, they don't have time to figure things out. They need to have things already basically figured out of what they're after, and then they'll feed me the shots that they want. Other times, they can let me be a little bit creative as far as shots, but I can't go crazy with it. So they do need to know, they do need to have parameters, because in TV, the directors follow the writers. So the directors can't just go off and make up their own stuff. In film, directors, they run everything, but in TV, the writers are the rulers, so directors just have to facilitate what the writers have in the script, and then we facilitate what's in the director's heads.
What's your timeline like in film compared to that?
Pardon me?
For film, what's it like?
Film, there's a leeway. There's a leeway as far as the director might have things shot listed, and like John Singleton likes to shot list everything. Ron Howard does not, so they'll let you be creative, but they have time. So some directors will shot list everything, some don't, and some it's a balance. They'll have certain shots were worked out and others not. So it's a balance.
Quite often, I'd like to jump in just saying that what's on the script isn't, for TV, it's probably pretty much verbatim, but for film, quite often it's not the final thing. So if they handed me a script and they said storyboard it, I'm basically bypassing the director completely. Usually when I'm talking with the director, he's telling me the stuff they're not going to do in the script, and the stuff that isn't written in the script, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So it works a little bit like that. But they are two different animals, especially if you're talking about timelines. Let's say in TV you're supposed to do 2 days work in 1 day, and if you if they're not ready to actually look at your storyboards and film, you probably have a week to do stuff that they won't see for another month. But you know.
That Iron Man 2 animatic, we worked on that for 4 months, that one scene. And I've done a lot of TV. I started in TV out in LA, and Space Above and Beyond, it's like a 20-year-old space show on Fox. And I storyboarded every 8 days, we got a new script, and we were making Star Wars every 8 days, 45 to 50 page scripts. And a movie, of course, will shoot a 100-page script for 2 or 3 months. But yeah, I worked on that Monaco sequence in Iron Man 2 from beginning of October until the end of January. And we just kept playing around with it. But we had the physical effects guys coming in, and we were doing like simulations as to how the cars would fall. And it was a big deal. But a sequence like that, TV, I storyboarded a scene for a director friend of mine for, I just went blank on the show in Miami with, about the spy that got kicked out.
Burn Notice.
Thank you.
I did that
Burn
show
Notice.
too.
And I did a car sequence for a director friend on that, just real quick one day. And I was like, okay, there's just some basic car stuff they're following. And he called me back. He's like, we can't shoot this. I was like, well, it's just some cars and car-to-car looking, and she hides behind something and dives in front of a truck. And he's like, we can't shoot that. And it's something I storyboarded in an evening. So yeah, and I actually like production-wise TV because it's always new. It's always, if the last week's script sucked, and you're like, oh, that was a terrible show. Well, guess what? You got another hour movie you're gonna make next week. And another one. It's really cool. And yeah, 4 months on one sequence. I was just like.
Okay, so that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next, please.
Hey guys, I have a question. How do you keep your cleanse your creative palette moving from project to project? Because I know that like a lot of times you're working from project to project to project.
Not
so
to plagiarize yourself?
Yeah, like do you have like a kind of mythology, or do you just go from project, like do you find inspiration from like getting new books or taking direction? Like how do you keep yourself fresh with new ideas?
You're almost asking, how do we get our next job?
Yeah.
Well, first, it works like this. First, you get fired from your old job.
And then you go to your new one.
And then, hopefully, somebody wants to hire you for the next job.
I guess also will be like a kind of each art department. That's also another great thing of the movie industry. It's like a kind of each art department that it gets formed for that film. It's like a family. So where you start investigating, you have research. You know, you have conversations. You start like lots and lots and lots of pictures and books and stuff like that. And so your head suddenly gets immersed in like a kind of in a complete new subject. And that's the incredible part of the journey. That is the amazing thing, because you know, if you're working in something in a subject that you never ever knew anything about before, now you become an expert, and you can reproduce it also too. So now I'm like with a magnifying glass, you know, looking at research pictures, see how all the pieces are put together, you know, looking for inspiration. And so you start, your juices start flowing. You know, the production designer brings a lot of things to the table too, but in my end, it's a very creative process. Like people usually, will look for your creativity, what you bring to the table. You know, what is, each of us have a different personality and bring a thing to the table. And then you finish that, you go into another, you start fresh, and then another set of, you know, reference pictures and different world, and then you start absorbing. And you have to become really good at it too. You have to become really good at switching from one thing to the other. Even though you can be better at sci-fi than, you know, you can be really good at monsters and really bad at machines, you know, but still you have to be very flexible and be able to fulfill the needs of that art department, no matter what the subject is.
Yeah, I think it's all about adaptation. And if all possible, never say, no, I can't do it. This is your time to learn. You take a job to learn. Otherwise, you're stagnant. And sometimes you gotta get out of that safety zone. So there's a lot of things where, you know, I'll just say yes and freak out, but by the end of the day, I'll definitely scramble and learn how to do it. And I think, you know, you should have that kind of, you know, sort of attitude towards it.
If you're lucky, you get to work on a different genre. I heard one guy complain that he worked for months coming up with spaceship designs, and the next job he was on was doing spaceship designs. So you basically had to, okay, everything I had in my head, now I got to come up with a whole new, you know, raft of
That's more it for me. It was just the aesthetic of if you're on the same things, how do you kind of separate it out? Thank you guys very much.
All right.
Thank you.
next. Okay, one more question. We got time for one more question, sorry.
Okay.
But believe me, you can ask whatever you want. Come over to the autograph area and find us right after this. All right, yes.
Hi, everyone. Very inspiring stuff here. What's your take on, it seems like there's been kind of like a, I don't know, like concept design is getting like really, really popular, and there's like, now there's actual like schools for concept design, whereas before it was more like artists kind of like doing stuff, and now it's like, I don't know, I kind of noticed that it's getting like really big, like you see concept artists all over. What's your take on that?
I'll do really, you guys are better at this. I'd take a quick stab, and that is when we first, all this started popping, it usually was coming out of like Sid Mead and automotive and transportation design and environmental design and stuff like that. I know people who are production designers who came out of product design, come out of, interesting tiles, that kind of stuff. So, but now that everybody has seen a lot of that artwork, which is hopefully one of the things we're trying to do is put that out forward. There's a lot of people interested, and they're interested in all that stuff. And anyway, Ed, you want to go on that?
Well, there's the image, and then there's the reality. Okay, not every day is going to be a Batmobile or Star Wars. You might be doing like Lois Lane's apartment. Okay, and you have a boss to answer to. A lot of these schools, there's always like a mountain and a mech robot and some guy on a horse, or a wide shot. I spent many months on doing a jail cell for Deadshot. And that's real concept art. The stuff that it's not necessarily exciting, but that's part of the job. So you have to distinguish, that stuff on people's website. Are those demos, or is that actually like something for a real production? You can kind of tell, what's just done for your website, and there's no parameters. There was no boss, there was no art director there. I can kind of tell. So just distinguish. And also, you can go online, you see all these schools and all this artwork, and it all looks the same now, okay, because we're using the same tools now. If you want to get into it at this point, how do you separate yourself from these guys? Okay, so I think everyone's good. Now, how do you be different? That's the next step if you want to get into it.
Yeah, that's why you cannot fall asleep. Like the competition is ferocious, and it's like it's everywhere. So you have to find where you're truly good at it, where you really love, and find your personality. I mean, it's like you're an artist, so artists all bring something different to the table, and but I guess it's the hardest thing to always, that the people that you're relevant, that you're bringing something that people appreciate to the table. So
It goes back to storytelling again. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like and the thing also too with this art is like you don't really have too much time. Also, like kind of when you're in a show, maybe the window of time to prove yourself is like a week. So they give you a subject, you sit down there, and you have to give it your best. And if you don't, out. That's it. Like kind of, it's not like oh no, but can I do one more? It's like no.
Okay, gang. We ran out of time. And if you'd like to talk to my guests, we're going to be going over to the pavilion area right now. I highly recommend you go see the Firefly at room 29 AB at 7 o'clock. I got Ed Natividad, Warren Drummond, David Duncan, and Andrea Dopaso. I'm Tim Burgard. Hope to see you again.